She was standing on a wagon like an old mule, head covered in a sack, feet bleeding into the wood, hands tied in front of her like a criminal. And they were bidding on her, like it was a game. $1, the fat man yelled, laughter thick in his throat. A real savage, yours forever. And the crowd laughed, too. Old men with sunburned necks and whiskey breath. Young punks with dust in their boots and no soul in their eyes. Caleb Morgan stood at the edge of that crowd, heart pounding like a war drum. He'd seen darkness before in the mud of Gettysburg in the eyes of dying boys. But this was worse. This was evil with an audience. He should have walked Yasso away. That's what folks like him do. Keep their head down. Let the world rot. But then the girl stumbled just once, like her knees gave out from the shame. And that was it. $1, he said, quiet, flat. The crowd shut up like someone slapped them all at once. The seller smirked, sold to the lonely farmer. He spat, mocking, and as Caleb climbed that wagon, cut the ropes, and lifted that sack. He expected a girl, a victim, a hollow thing. What he saw was defiance. Eyes like ambers. Shoulders squared, not afraid, not broken. That look would follow him the rest of his life. He didn't know her name. Didn't know her story, but he knew the moment he touched that rope, he bought more than a woman. He bought a war he wasn't ready for. Caleb didn't say a word the whole ride home. Not because he was trying to be mysterious. He just didn't know what the hell to say. He'd lived alone for 7 years, ever since Mary passed. He got used to the quiet. Some days he even preferred it. But now he had company. And not just any kind. A woman who hadn't spoken a word since he cut her loose. Who didn't cry, didn't thank him, didn't look scared. She just walked behind his horse barefoot like it was nothing. By the time they reached the ranch, the sun was low. The place looked smaller than usual. Almost ashamed of itself. Caleb felt that, too. He pointed to the small barn and said, "You can stay there. There's a cotton water." She gave no sign she'd heard. That night, he couldn't sleep. The silence wasn't the same anymore. It had a pulse now. A presence. Next morning, he left food and coffee on the porch. He didn't see her take it, but by noon, the plate was clean. For 3 days, neither of them said a word, but things started to shift. One morning he found the gate latch fixed better than he'd ever done it. Another day his torn shirt was sewn up neat like a store-bought one. He started talking, not to her really, just out loud about the cows, the weather. The ache in his knee. No answers came, but she listened. He could feel it. Then came the storm. Big one. Black clouds rolling fast. Wind like a damn train. Caleb ran to the barn to get the cattle in. And saw her standing in the doorway watching the sky like it was an old enemy. He yelled, "Get in. Get inside." She didn't move. Not until the lightning cracked hard and close. He ran back, grabbed her arm and pulled her to the cabin, slammed the door shut behind them. They stood there, soaked to the bone, hearts pounding. That's when he saw a flicker of fear in her eyes. The storm didn't scare him, but that look did, because for the first time, she wasn't just surviving. She was vulnerable, human. After that stormy night, something shifted between them. Not with words, not with promises, but with presence. Every morning, Caleb would leave coffee and a plate of cornbread on the porch. He didn't see her take it, but by mid-morning, it was gone. She started sitting on the edge of the porch steps, not close, but not hiding anymore either. He learned her name, not from her lips, but from a drawing in the dust. One morning, he found an old saddle all he'd lost weeks ago. Placed neatly on the porch rail. Next to it, drawn softly in the dirt, was a prairie flower. That night, he pulled out one of Mary's old botany books, page 47. There it was, Ayana. A flower, and in the Comanche language, it meant eternal bloom. So the next morning he said it softly as he set the plate down. Ayana. She didn't flinch, didn't look at him, but from that day on he kept saying it. And each time her eyes lingered just a second longer. A few days later she said his name, Caleb. One word, quiet, steady, but it stopped him cold. After years of silence, his name sounded like music in someone else's voice. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. They started fixing the place up together, her silent touch in the kitchen, his steady hands on the land. He read to her in the evenings, fumbling through faded pages by firelight. Sometimes she'd smile when he mispronounced a word. They were building something slow and honest. One quiet evening, as he was sharpening a hoe by the barn, Ayana walked over and gently placed her hand on his. She didn't say a thing. She didn't have to. It was the first time he didn't feel like a man just surviving. And if he had known what was coming, he might have sharpened a rifle instead of a hoe. But that's the funny thing about peace. You never know how much you needed it until it's about to be taken away. And if you stuck around this far, maybe, just maybe, you're the kind of soul who still believes in stories like theirs. If that's true, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Stick around because the West has a lot more to tell. Word spreads fast in small towns, especially when the folks talking got nothing better to do. Back in Rob Bend, the whispers about Caleb and that Comanche woman had turned into full-blown stories. To some folks called it a scandal, others a joke. But Garrett Sloan, he took it as a personal insult. See, Garrett was the one who had dragged Ayana into town in the first place. He thought he'd sell her quick, have a drink, and move on. Instead, some quiet widower made him look like a damn fool in front of everyone. Now, every time someone mentioned Caleb's name, it was followed by snickers. And Garrett's pride was a raw nerve. And when a man like that gets embarrassed, he doesn't forget. He waits. He stews until he's ready to make a mess. One dusty afternoon, Caleb spotted a cloud on the horizon. Not the kind that brings rain. The kind kicked up by horses. 4 riders moving fast. Caleb sat down the fence post he was mending. Ayana, he called calmly. Go inside. Lock the door. She looked up from her garden, saw the dust, and without a word slipped into the cabin. The riders didn't slow. They came up bold, loud, and half-drunk. Garrett leading the way. Afternoon. Vance. He spat the name like a curse. Heard you've been playing house with stolen goods. Caleb didn't flinch, didn't raise his voice. She's not stolen, he said. She's my wife. The words were heavy. Not a legal truth, maybe, but a heart-deep one. Garrett laughed ugly and sharp. You think that changes anything? She belongs to the town. We paid for her once. We'll take her back now. He dismounted, hand on his belt like he was reaching for something. Caleb's rifle was already in his hands. Calm, steady. She's not going anywhere, he said, eyes locked on Garrett. You can leave or you can find out how serious I am. For a long second, the only sound was wind in the grass. Then the cabin door creaked open. Ayana stepped out, not with a weapon, but wearing that blue calico shawl he'd once left for her. She walked to Caleb's side, head held high. And in that moment, she didn't need to say a thing. She was already home. For a long second, no one moved. Caleb stood steady, rifle in hand. Ayana stood beside him. No gun, no threat, just presence, but somehow louder than any bullet. Garrett looked between them, saw something he didn't expect. Not fear, not confusion. He saw a man and a woman who had already survived too much to be shaken by men like him. He muttered something under his breath, backed up. The others didn't argue. They weren't there for a war. They were there to scare, and they'd failed. By the time their dust settled over the horizon, Caleb hadn't even lowered his rifle. He just turned to Ayana and nodded. That night they didn't speak much. They didn't have to. The danger was gone, but something else had settled in. Peace. Not the kind that sneaks in quietly and leaves just as fast. The kind you earn. The kind you fight for. And it stuck around by seasons past. The ranch changed. So did they. Ayana's garden grew wild and beautiful. Caleb's hands grew rougher but steadier. They built something together. Not out of what they lost, but from what they chose to keep going. Love, maybe, but more than that, trust. And that, my friend, is what the West was always really about. Not the gunfights or the saloons, not the gold or the cattle, but the grit it takes to stay, to rebuild when life burns it all down, to love again, even when it scares you. Now, maybe you're watching this and thinking about your own battles. Maybe you've lost someone. Maybe you've had your own version of Garrett Sloan right up your path. Let me ask you something. What did you stand for when it got hard? What kept you from giving up? And more than that, who stood beside you? If this story stirred something in you, if it reminded you of someone or made you look back at your own long road, go ahead and hit that like button. And if you want more stories like this, ones that make you feel, think, maybe even remember, then do yourself a favor and subscribe. Because out here, in the dust and wind of the West, every now and then someone finds their way home. And when they do, you'll want to hear about